Well, hello and welcome to another in the series of Café Insights. I'm Andrew Vine, the founder and CEO of the Insight Bureau, and today I'm in conversation with Robin Bew. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for having me along. It's great to be here.
Well, Robin is a global economist, and writer and advisor, formerly the managing director of the EIU, the Economist Intelligence Unit, and actually before that, editorial director and the chief economist.
That's right. I mean, I worked for the Economist Group for nearly 30 years. So I joined on the content side. So as Andrew said, I was the chief economist and editorial director, which is kind of editor-in-chief of that business-to-business operation. I did a lot of consulting work, so working with our clients all around the world, really on the international strategy, so out here in Asia, but also in the States, the Middle East and Africa. And then for the last decade, I actually ran that division of the group, so that's a full P&L, so I had my own sales team, content, and so know what it's like to actually hands-on try and run an operation, and that's been quite useful because I think being able to combine that understanding of politics and economics with what it means to run a business and have some personal experience of that, I think that's quite powerful and really has shaped some of the work I do with clients now.
Absolutely. Well, you were there when I first joined The Economist.
Right.
I left after 13 years. He was still there for many more years. And that was always the thing, that we were, our mission was to help make sense of the world, bring people together to think about how to act smart in terms of making good business decisions, but also to look smart. We were creating conferences and events for people to come together, have meaningful dialogue. And all that work was the precursor of what I do today, which is run the Speaker Bureau, where we're taking customized activity like that, people like yourself who come in and just add value in some way, speak, moderate, do briefings and things like that. So, great. So, you're here just on this occasion. You come for business often, but this is just holiday this time.
This is holiday, yes.
Right.
I do come out to the region quite a bit for business. So I know over the years I spent a lot of time here in Singapore, obviously with you, Andrew, but a lot of our clients here and across the rest of the region. So when I was running the EIU, we had a big team of people here in Singapore, but I also ran teams on mainland China and Hong Kong, and down in Australia, Japan. So yes, I've spent a lot of time for work here over the years, working with Western businesses who are trying to be successful here, but actually also working with local firms that are looking at expanding out into other parts of the world. So, and that's been great. It's really rewarding to talk to people who are trying to do those sorts of things. So I'm out here for work quite a bit.
Yeah, good. And you do a bit of lecturing, like Henley.
I just did a series of conversations at Henley Management School back in the UK. It's about a global economy, but it was really pegged on the US presidential election. I'm sure we'll talk about that in a minute. So what Trump might mean for businesses, and that was kind of focused on the impact on UK firms. That's their particular client set. And just more generally, I spent quite a bit of time talking to people in the last 12 months or so about how geopolitics, just things have been really quite fractious around the world recently, how that might impact on people's international operations and their strategic thinking. So, yes.
Well, there's a lot going on. I mean,
yes,
to say the least.
Yeah.
What do you find people are most concerned about?
Right now, it's obviously Trump and the transition in the US. So I think when I actually did that conversation at Henley, it was scheduled to be a week after the presidential election, and there was a moment when I thought actually we wouldn't know who the president was going to be at that point. Now it turned out to be more decisive than a lot of people expected. So there's a lot of interest right now about how Trump's policies, will they be enacted? If they are enacted, what's it going to mean for my organisation, my international strategy? There's a lot of interest in that, but actually also in this region, a lot of conversations about sort of the short-term supply chain reorganisation, what that means for Southeast Asia. Are we going to see more businesses pulling back to the States, all that kind of, and then perhaps a little bit longer term, this tension between the US and China and what it's going to mean for other countries in the region. Are they going to have to choose who they're aligned with? If they are, what's that? So there's a lot of conversations about that and the strategic impacts, because clearly a lot of companies that I talk to, they are deriving a lot of revenue and profit in this region, but they're also deriving a lot of revenue and profit on the US, and this sense about how in the long term is that under threat. How would you deal with that? So a lot of conversations about that kind of thing.
And I think amongst the emerging markets, I mean, so much attention has been on China.
Yeah.
It depends who you talk to in terms of what the prospects are for the Chinese economy. And I was listening to a presentation the other day and saying, you know what, that China is one by one taking a stronger position in every industry you can point to. It's just, but at the same time, I see people looking actively at alternative markets, where India in particular and others, where there might also be interesting opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think in China, when you look at their strategy, so clearly they've been through some economic difficult times, although we have to put that in perspective. I mean, they're still going to grow by 4 or 5% a year, which is a lot faster than most of the Western world grows. But I mean, for them, a more challenging environment, government's throwing some money at those problems. But then if you step back from that sort of short-term economic dislocation, there's this issue where they are slowly sort of becoming a bit more inwards focused on the way that they look at key industries, a lot more Western companies being squeezed out in one dimension or another. And as you say, firms looking elsewhere. I am excited about what's happening in India because, and you'll know this from the times when we worked together, for a long time India was this kind of sleeping giant. Everyone was very excited about it, but most organisations were really struggling to be successful there. And while there still is a lot of red tape doing business in India, that's true. I mean, it's now consistently growing more quickly than China. It's got a bigger population than China. Clearly, it's still a smaller economy, but increasing number of businesses in the West, but actually also in other parts of the world, looking at India as a place where there's a potential to derive some scale that previously perhaps was only possible in China. So I think the India story is interesting, and it's quite gratifying to see that country's doing rather better. And I used to have a big office of people in India just outside Delhi. You spend a lot of time there, and it's great to see that economy doing well.
Yeah, so the key thing we were talking earlier is trying to make sense of economics to people who are not economists. I mean, because at the end of the day, there's an awful lot. I think that the challenge for business leaders right now is the complexity. There's such a lot. It's not just about economics and business opportunities. It's about your geopolitics, which is the terrain in which you have to do business. We're bringing in new technologies, incredible fast pace. We're concerned about environment and sustainability. Such a lot. One of the things I think is an advantage for you is that you've not only been the person helping to make sense of the economics, but you've been the business leader yourself at the IU and had to deal with all these things.
Yeah, I mean, a direct experience of some of the kind of political constraints on business. Obviously, if you work for the Economist Group, there's some big challenges in parts of the world, China very obviously and specifically, about what you're allowed to do there and the relationship that you have with the government. We were very, very anti-censorship, and so obviously wrote some things about the government they didn't like. But just more broadly, I mean, I think in a lot of countries, having permission, both with a capital P but also with a small p, in order to play in that market does require you to manage your relationships with the regulators or the government, and how do you go about doing that? I think those are really core business skills that have to be looked at alongside the economic environment. So it's no good putting all your eggs in a country which you think is going to grow very quickly if you're not able to actually execute the strategy on the ground. And that means understanding the politics, business environment more generally.
Yeah. And, acquiring businesses and integrating them and having all the cross-cultural issues to have to deal with as well.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I used to run a lot of regional offices in this part of the world and elsewhere, and I did some acquisitions. So we did acquire a company here in Singapore and integrated it into the business, acquired some businesses in the UK and in the States. So I do understand some of the challenges that brings. So some of those acquisitions ultimately were very successful, but you do have to overcome some of these cultural issues when you're buying, particularly when you're buying small businesses. I'm trying to bring them into an organisation. The Economist Group is not huge, but if you're running a small business, it can feel pretty big. And how do you integrate them and make it work in a way that doesn't destroy the reason that you bought that organisation in the first place? I think that's the key thing. Lots of businesses buy other companies and then break them in the integration process. How do you avoid doing that? So I've done that on a few occasions around the world. I think there's a real skill there.
Yeah. So as we look forward, I think a lot of businesses are facing some headwinds. That's without a doubt. The jury is out in terms of whether the change in the US administration is going to dampen trade if the tariffs go up and things like that is naturally a worry. But generally speaking, how do you think, what is the state of the world economy at this stage? Are we in danger of it receding?
I don't think we're going to have some kind of economic crisis. In fact, in the US under Donald Trump, I think the long run outlook is going to be more challenging because of some of his policies of slapping tariffs on everyone, and particularly on China. But I think we need to be realistic. Those things will be challenged legally in the States as well. So I think there will be a lot of disruption, a lot of uncertainty. But whether you see tariffs applied at the kinds of rates he's talking about consistently, I think that's a bit more questionable. And other things he's going to do will probably drive the US economy forwards more quickly. So he's going to spend a lot of money, he's going to cut taxes. Now, in the long run, those things will probably be inflationary. But I think in the short run, that's actually going to help a bit. I think when you look in other parts of the world, geopolitical issues are, so if you look at Europe, for example, there's a lot of economic challenges on the continent in Europe, but you can't abstract from what's happening with Russia and Ukraine and the impact that that's having on confidence in the region. So we're thinking about those things. But I don't think we're about to see some kind of big coordinated global downturn in the next couple of years or so. But I think what we will see is a lot of uncertainty, primarily driven by uncertainty about whether Donald Trump can execute all the policies he wants to, and that's going to end up in court. So a lot of uncertainty around that, a lot of uncertainty around some of these geopolitical issues, so China, South China Sea, so relationship with other countries in the region, what's happening with Russia, Ukraine. Those things just create uncertainty for business. Uncertainty tends to weigh on their willingness to invest. But I still think there's plenty of opportunity out there for companies that are able to navigate all of that.
Yeah. Well, terrific. Robin, it's great to see you again.
It's great to be here.
Thanks for the time.
Thank you very much.
Right, and I'll see you in London next year.
Absolutely.
Brilliant.
Yep, look forward to it.
Lovely. Thanks very much.
Thank you.